Hey guys, what is up? John here from fly8mikealpha.com, and today we are talking about all the crazy arrival and departure procedures going in and out of Merrill Field in Anchorage, Alaska. And by the end of this video, hopefully you won't think these procedures are too crazy, really. They're actually fairly straightforward and easy to understand. We'll cover the arrivals and departures as well as how to study and how to prepare yourself to fly in and out of Merrill, whether you're a student or maybe you just haven't even flown in and out of Merrill in a little while and you want to refresh yourself a little bit. Let's get to it. Alright, so for starters, what we are talking about is the SATR, the Special Air Traffic Rule that exists around Elmendorf, Merrill, Lake Hood, in the Anchorage area here. That is that white space you see on the sectional chart here. So if you're wondering why the ground is white and not green or some other color, that is a SATR, Special Air Traffic Rule. And Special Air Traffic Rules are covered by Part 93. So just like we have Part 91 we're used to, this is Part 93. And we have some general rules for the Merrill segment of the SATR that exists around Anchorage. So if we come down here to Part 9363, we'll see the Merrill segment, and good luck looking for this in your FAR AIM. That little paper book is not the best resource in the world because it does not have all of 14 CFR. 14 CFR is everything from Part 1 up to well past Part 135. So we've got Part 93 in here, and you will probably not be finding Part 93 in the FAR AIM. It'll jump right from 91 on to something else. So you'll have to go to ecfr.gov to actually find this, or some other website that actually has the full rules of flying in there. And what we see here are some general rules, right? So let's talk about these general rules before we get into anything else. No person can operate an aircraft at an altitude between 600 feet MSL and 2,000 feet MSL in the portion of the segment lying north of the mid-channel of the Knik Arm. Now that sounds complicated. It really isn't too bad. What they're talking about is this right in here, right? So we've got Merrill Field down in here. And as you take off out of Merrill, they're saying, hey, you know, in the section that is Merrill's airspace of the Knik Arm, this is the Knik Arm, that body of water there, when you're in this area up in here, they don't want you to be between 600 or 2,000 feet MSL. They want you to either be 600 or below or 2,000 and above. And we'll see that on the procedures when we start looking at them. So how do we start studying to go in and out of Merrill's airspace? Well, for starters, it'd be a good idea to look at the sectional chart, right? We can see where Merrill's airspace exists. It's this very tiny little Class D portion here. And if you're unsure what all this airspace is around this general area, you may want to go ahead and refer to our Lake Hood video that actually details out every single little piece of airspace here, what the ceilings and floors are, and where it all actually lies laterally. So if this is a little too confusing to you because there's too many markings, go ahead and check out that other video. We'll leave the link in the description below so you can review that and then come back here. So Merrill's airspace covers the Knik Arm in this tiny little band right here over the waterway. That's what most of our departure procedures are talking about. Now, to start off preparing yourself to go in and out of Merrill, start by going ahead and going to the Alaska Chart Supplement. Just Google Alaska Chart Supplement, go to the FAA website, and print out pages 386 through 397. That's going to be covering everything you need as a fixed-wing pilot. First thing is you want to look at this and try to start remembering some of these VFR reporting points and finding them maybe on Google Earth and getting used to what they look like from the air when you're actually going to be flying your airplane. Next, come on down here, and we have the common pattern entries for runways 2534 and 523. Now know that at Merrill, they really like to use runway 25. That is their main runway, and the wind typically favors that. Even when it's a slight tailwind, they'll still try to keep using that unless you say otherwise as the pilot. Now you can see here for pattern entries when you're coming across the Knik Arm, if you're going to be using runway 25, they like to use right traffic. They prefer you come around here right to the mouth of Ship Creek. That's the edge of the airspace for Elmendorf, so if you just stay just to the south of the mouth of Ship Creek and then fly inbound here, you'll make right traffic and you'll come around to runway 25. That's what they're looking for. And again, that Part 93 rule applies to us. We need to be below 600 feet or above 2,000 feet, and preferably 2,000 feet or above crossing here, because that rule also says to us that when you're operating an airplane at a speed of less than 105 knots within the segment in Merrill's airspace, they want you to operate at least 900 feet MSL until maneuvering for a safe landing requires further descent. Traffic pattern altitude at Merrill is 900 feet. It's a little bit easier to cross the Knik Arm at 2,000 feet and then descend down to 900 for traffic pattern altitude, rather than it is to come in at 600 feet and then have to climb up to 900 feet for the traffic pattern. Plus, crossing the Knik Arm at 600 feet, if you have an engine failure, it's going to get mighty cold, mighty fast. That's a lot bigger body of water than it looks like. This chart, of course, also covers traffic pattern entries for the other runways coming in here for, say, 3-4, or coming around for 5 or 2-3. And then for runway 7 and for runways 1-6, we have another diagram that illustrates the pattern entries. And as long as you can find these VFR reporting points, well, then it makes life pretty easy to be able to fly the correct path into these runways. Studying up on these two pattern entry charts is a great idea before you go flying in and out of Merrill, just so you know how to get in, and especially if you're taking off on your first lesson out of there, a great idea to have some sort of clue of how you're supposed to come back into the airport on these preset routes. The chart supplement has one more plate here for the traffic pattern entries to runway 5 and 2-3. That is the preferred routes arriving for the traffic pattern for that runway. And then after that, we get into this next plate here, and this is Cartier Airspace. And why is it called Cartier Airspace? Well, that's a question that if you know the answer to, you can leave in the comments below. That's a little trivia for you there. But the most important thing, what you really need to know about this is a section of Merrill's airspace that occasionally becomes Elmendorf's airspace, and if it's Elmendorf's airspace and you're talking to Merrill, well, you can't just go fly right through it. They typically don't put this on the ATIS because it's only active for a short time, and the reason behind this Cartier airspace is when you're flying into Merrill and you're on final for 2-5, you'll be able to figure it out right away. Looking just to your right, you'll see that you're also crossing the final approach to the north runways at Elmendorf. So we can see here that if they have big heavies arriving to the north runways at Elmendorf, they may not want you flying final right through there. So they kind of buy a little bit of airspace from Merrill just to keep you clear of the heavies that are arriving down into Elmendorf. And Tower will let you know if the Cartier airspace is active. The best way to avoid the Cartier airspace is simply staying south of the Northern Lights Boulevard or a little bit to the west of Braga Street where Costco is. The next plate we come across in the chart supplement is the Ship Creek departure from Merrill Field, and the Ship Creek departure is fairly straightforward. What it's telling you is that when you take off of any of these runways here, right? So when you're taking off of runway, say 2-5, for example, turn right to the mouth of Ship Creek and then northwestbound. So what they want you to do is find the mouth of Ship Creek. Don't go past it because that's going to be Elmendorf's airspace right here, so we want to stay just to the south there, find the mouth of Ship Creek, and then go ahead and cross the Knik Arm either below 600 feet, at or below 600 feet, or at or above 2,000 feet. We can see here all aircraft cross Knik Arm below 600 or at or above 2,000 feet, and if unable 2,000 feet by mid-channel, advise ATC. The reason that they don't want you between 600 or 2,000 is they have arrivals for Elmendorf coming through here that are going to be coming in maybe at 1,200 to 1,500 feet, so they're trying to keep you clear of those heavy arrivals. Note that when you go low, you'll be underneath their wake turbulence, and when you go high, you have a lot more chance of actually, possibly gliding to the shore in the event of an engine failure, or rather than just splashing down somewhere in the area out here. Luckily, if you do splash down out here, you're really close to where they launch the rescue helicopters from, so that's kind of handy. But I like flying a little bit higher rather than, at 600 feet across very cold water. Now, something you'll hear on the ground sometimes from ATC at Merrill when you're about to take off, maybe Tower tells you no altitude deviations, right? Clear for takeoff runway 25, fly the Ship Creek departure, no altitude deviations. What they're saying is you need to stick to that 600 or 2,000 foot rule, so either at or below 600, at or above 2,000. Now, if they don't say no altitude deviations, that doesn't automatically mean that you can fly whatever altitude you want. The rule still stands that you need to be at or below 600 or at or above 2,000. Now, you can always ask for altitude deviations, say you want to cross at 1,200 or 1,500 feet or something like that, then that could be totally fair, and if it's approved by ATC, you're in good shape. How that works is Anchorage TRACON, down here, knows what the arrivals are going into Elmendorf. They either give Merrill a red light or a green light for that airspace between 600 and 2,000 feet across the Knik Arm. If the light's green, Merrill will grant altitude deviations. If the light's red, Merrill will not grant altitude deviations going across the Knik Arm. Whether you're flying the Ship Creek departure off of runway 25, which is most common, or flying it off of runway 5, 7, or 3-4, pretty straightforward. Simply follow these little instructions here of turn left, follow Ship Creek to the mouth of Ship Creek, and then northwestbound across the arm, either below 600 or above 2,000 unless you get that altitude deviation approved. Now, when you're on the ground at Merrill, it is possible for you to ask ground control on your initial call-up for flight following. Ground control will then coordinate with Anchorage TRACON, and they'll get you a squawk code so that when you take off and you're done talking to the tower, you can go ahead and talk to Anchorage departure and be aware of any other traffic in the area. Now, next on our list here is going to be the Inlet departure. fairly similar, but this inlet departure is just for runway 25. And what it basically tells you is for aircraft departing Merrill to the west and northwest at or above 2,000 from runway 25. This one doesn't have that 600-foot option. They want you to go ahead and take off and climb in a left traffic pattern and then be at 1,300 feet or above when you're south and coming abeam the control tower, right? So when you're to the south of the field and you're abeam the control tower, you should be at 1,300 feet or above, then begin your turn northbound while you're still climbing, and go ahead and fly over 9th Avenue, that little strip there, Delaney Park, and then cross the arm at or above 2,000 feet. What this looks like in real life is taking off a runway 25, coming around here, climbing, getting abeam the control tower, which is right over here, being at 1,300 feet or better, turning northbound, and then going ahead and flying to the west over 9th Avenue, which is right here. And there's the Delaney Park strip, that little green strip right in downtown Anchorage. Fly over that and then proceed northwestbound. And as you're proceeding northwestbound, there's Point McKenzie, there's Point No Name. Proceed northwestbound in between the two of them at or above 2,000 feet. The most important part to any of these plates is to actually read the full plate if that's what you intend to do. It's a great idea to have this printed out in the aircraft with you or available on your iPad or something. I like printing it out just so the batteries don't die, and you always have this, and you can make little notes on it too if you'd like. But read the full plate either way. Tells you the route purpose up here and tells you exactly how to comply with everything right down here in this section. Of course, these plates do change from time to time, so you want to make sure you have the most up-to-date ones and don't just be doing these things by memory. It's a good idea to be referencing a plate every so often, as these altitudes do sometimes change. This used to be 2,200 feet, now it's 2,000. Keeping up to date on your charts is always a great idea. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next departure procedure out of Merrill, right? So this is the Shoreline departure off runway 25, and the purpose of this one is for aircraft departing Merrill Field to the west and northwest at or above 2,000 feet from runway 25. Sounds an awful lot like the one we just looked at, right? Sounds an awful lot like the inlet departure. So what's the difference really? Well, in this case, instead of climbing in a left-hand traffic pattern, they simply want you to cross the Knik Arm at or above 2,000 feet, and they're expecting you to be a little bit more high-performance aircraft. Maybe you're a 206 or a 180 or something like that. And so you actually can take off on a straight-out departure and climb straight to the downtown shoreline up to 2,000 feet and cross the Knik Arm. They want you to be 2,000 feet absolutely by mid-channel. If you can't do that, let them know. So you don't have to be 2,000 feet here, but you need to be, reasonably expecting to make it, and don't let them know mid-channel that, hey, by the way, I'm only at 1,200 feet. Try to let them know a little sooner if you know you're not going to make that 2,000 feet by mid-channel. As soon as you realize it, go ahead and let them know. You can see the general theme of most of these departures involves the mouth of Ship Creek, so really have an idea of where that is on the ground, what it looks like when you're taking off runway 25 off your right-hand side there, and then Point No Name and Point McKenzie. Know what all those points look like. So we have the mouth of Ship Creek right here, we have Point No Name, and we have Point McKenzie. Now moving on to a little bit more fun for departures, right? Now we have the City High departure for runway 34 off Merrill. Runway 34 is that north runway that you're going to have to make a pretty quick turn for because Elmendorf's airspace is right there. So the City High departure is for aircraft that are departing Merrill to the west and northwest at or above 2,000 feet. Again, 2,000 is a great idea going across the water. That water is super cold. So how do we fly the City High off runway 34? Well, we depart via a right downwind, so nice quick right crosswind, right downwind turn. We climb southbound along Lake Otis Parkway, that little road right there. You continue along Lake Otis Parkway all the way down to UAA, and then you make that left-handed turn back around, coming back towards the airport. And they want you to be somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 feet as you're making this northwestbound turn, flying northwestbound towards the mouth of Ship Creek, and keep that mouth of Ship Creek off your right wing so you're not getting into Elmendorf's airspace, and then go ahead and cross the channel at or above 2,000 feet. That's not necessarily as complicated as it could be. Let's go ahead and take a look at the City High departure off of runways 16 and 23. So doing the City High off runway 23 or off runway 16, very similar. So we're going to go ahead and fly towards UAA. We're going to make that left-handed turnaround between 1,500 and 2,000 feet, and then head northwestbound between 1,500 and 2,000 feet, crossing the Knik Arm at or above 2,000 feet, and keeping the mouth of Ship Creek off our right wing, staying just south there, staying outside of Elmendorf's airspace. The trick here to the City High when you're coming off of runway 23 or runway 16 is they want you to turn left and proceed directly to UAA, like we said, but you want to do that below 600 feet until you're south of 15th Avenue, all right? So let's go ahead and take a look at the roads. Where is 15th Avenue? Well, there is Merrill. There's runway 23 and runway 16, and 15th Avenue is this road right here. So as soon as you cross the departure end of runway 16, or as soon as you see this road just outside the the airport fence right there, that is 15th Avenue. That is when you can go ahead and start climbing above 600 feet. So if you have a real high-performance aircraft and you're gaining a whole bunch of altitude, you're off by halfway down the runway and you're rocketing on up, stay below 600 feet until you're south of 15th Avenue. Then go ahead and fly towards UAA, keep on climbing. After UAA, make that left-handed turn to be between 1,500 and 2,000 feet as you fly these arrows northwest bound. Stay outside Elmendorf's airspace, get across that arm in 2,000 feet. Pretty straightforward. Next on the list is the Chester Creek departure for runways 16 and 23. You guys can see the general theme here, right? We're just simply looking at what the purpose of this is, right? It's for aircraft that are departing Merrill Field to the west and northwest. That's where most of those guys are going. So that's when we use all these departures. And you can pick which departure you want to use. You simply tell ATC, tell ground control, or tell tower that you're going to be flying the Chester Creek departure, or the City High departure, or the Ship Creek departure. Let them know the departure name more so than your direction of flight. They don't really care if you're north or westbound or whatever you are. They care more about which departure you intend to fly and comply with. So for the Chester Creek, we're simply going to go ahead and cross the Knik Arm below 600 feet or above 2,000 feet. Again, I prefer the 2,000 version. But we're going to be taking off out of runways 16 or 23, so we're going to be going southbound when the wind's coming out of the south or southwest. We go ahead and fly along Chester Creek. We can see proceed to and turn right over Chester Creek, follow the creek to Westchester Lagoon, and then from Westchester Lagoon, go ahead and cross over the Knik Arm. Now, last on our list, guys, this is the last one, I promise. I know it sounds like there's a lot of options to get in and out of Merrill. There are a lot of options to depart from Merrill, but most importantly, just pick one that you really like, that works for the aircraft you're flying, stick with it, and you'll use it probably about 95 to 98% of the time. They're always using runway 25, it seems, and you can pretty much stick with whichever one of these departure procedures you like to use. Like I said, 90-some% of the time, especially when you're always flying to the northwest or out towards the west. So this one is the Campbell arrival departure. It is one of the few that is an arrival departure combined up. So there's an option to use this as a departure or as an arrival. Now, let's say we're going to go ahead and depart runway, runway 7. Maybe we're going to change it up a bit here, right? I'm getting bored of using runway 25. So if I want to depart runway 7, we'll simply come on down here and read what it says, right? So we're going to say, okay, we need to climb straight out to Braga Street and then turn right. So we're going to take off runway 7, hit Braga Street, and hopefully I'm saying that right. Make that right turn, follow it on down towards the Tudor bus barn, and we're going to be following it on down towards the Tudor bus barn, and then ... Well, in the case of the ... we have to come down here and see what to do from the Tudor bus barn, overfly Elmore Road until south of O'Malley Road. So we have Braga Street, Tudor bus barn. We want to be at 1,200 feet crossing the Tudor bus barn, so we will be climbing here up to 1,200, hitting this right at 1,200, not going higher, not going lower, and then following Elmore Road on southbound until we get south of O'Malley Road, and then they're like, well, you know what, you can do whatever you want. This is going to be Anchorage Airspace right here, the Surface Class Charlie. This is the Class Delta over at Lake Hood, and of course you're clear of the Class Delta from Merrill, so now you can go ahead, head south of O'Malley Road, and then proceed on course, whether you want to go southeast, southwest, whatever you want to do, go south, you can go wherever you want. And the same process applies if we're going to be using runway 25 or 34. We simply read here, come to the ... and then comply with the last part, overfly Elmore Road when you're outbound until you're south of O'Malley Road. Now, all aircraft, regardless of what runway you're on here, you have to maintain 1,200 feet between Tudor Road and the Campbell airstrip. So what they're saying here is be at 1,200 feet in this area because Lake Hood, LHD, Lake Hood traffic departs at or below 900 and arrives at 1,500. So you got arrivals coming in at 1,500 along Tudor Road, departures going out at 900. You're going to squeeze right between them with just about 300 feet separation. Hopefully you got that altimeter setting right, and you're going to be 300 above or 300 below the arrivals and departures going into Lake Hood. Now, if you want to go ahead and use this Campbell arrival, if you want to use it as an arrival procedure, well, in that case, you could go ahead and just simply comply with what's on the chart here, right? Inbounds, north of O'Malley Road, fly along the extended track of Boniface Parkway to the safety building, and then follow common pattern entry instructions, right? So Birch Road, passing the Campbell airstrip to the safety building, that extended center line of Boniface Parkway, begin at 1,200 feet there. Try to contact Merrill Tower. Well, roughly when you're near the Potter's Marsh area or a few miles out. Don't contact them when you're right here. That makes it really difficult for everybody. Give them a heads up that you're coming. And they certainly like it when you call them up and you say, hey, Merrill Tower, Cessna 12345, over Potter's Marsh, Campbell arrival, landing with Yankee. Then they know you're doing this. They know you know the arrival procedure. They don't have to worry about you so much. They know you know what's up with this area, that you're going to go ahead and comply with the procedure. They know you got the ATIS, and they know you want to come in and land, and they will go ahead and give you instructions from there. So that's one example what you could tell Merrill Tower when you're coming in to land at Merrill, that, hey, I'm over Potter's March, I'm flying the Campbell arrival with Yankee. You could also be coming in, of course, from over here, since most of those departures feed you out this direction. It makes sense you're probably going to come in from that direction at some point or another. Well, in that case, they like you to call up about 3 to 5 miles from the shoreline here, so they got a little bit of time to plan with you. Now, you could call up approach, and note here that you're going to need to be below 1,400 feet or above 1,900 feet to remain clear of the Class Charlie airspace if you're coming in from this direction. So you could come in at 2,000 feet and then bump right into the delta and never have to talk to approach. You could come in below 1,400 feet and then cut into the delta, never have to talk to approach. But remember, the rule still applies: 600 or below crossing the Knik Arm, 2,000 or above. Unless you get an altitude deviation in this case, you'd be calling approach first and asking for that altitude deviation. Approach knows if the light's green or red, if there's any sort of arrivals going into Elmendorf. And in that case, approach could give you an altitude deviation to go ahead and cross at 1,500 feet. And if you're talking to approach, you're automatically cleared into the Class Charlie airspace, unless they told you something like, hey, remain clear of the Class Charlie airspace. But for the most part, once you have that two-way radio communication, you're cleared through the Class Charlie. And if you so choose to cross the Knik Arm at 1,200 feet or 1,500 feet or whatever it might be, approach can approve that altitude deviation for you. Now, what does it sound like if you're over here and you're at 2,000 feet? So you're clear of the Class Charlie airspace, you're going to go ahead and proceed inbound, and you're just going to call Merrill Tower directly. Well, you could say, Merrill Tower, Cessna 12345, 3 miles northwest, point no name, landing runway 25 with hotel. Now they know what runway you want to land on, what runway you're going to proceed inbound for, and they'll go ahead and give you instructions from there. As a general rule of thumb, the controllers in Merrill don't really care about your direction of flight when you're taking off. They care more about what runway you want to use when you're taking off and what departure procedure you want to use. So let them know the departure procedure, let them know the runway, and they'll give you taxi instructions. Ground will give you taxi instructions to that runway. Now, a few quick notes about Merrill to go ahead and wrap this up. A few little helpful notes here, right? If you want an altitude deviation going across the channel, well, go ahead and make that request with ground control. Then local, or tower, will go ahead and approve or deny that request when they give you your takeoff clearance. When you're talking to ground control on your initial call-up, go ahead and let them know what runway you want to use and what departure procedure you want to use. They don't care what your direction of flight is. And of course, let them know you have the ATIS. If you're going to want flight following from Anchorage approach after you take off and clear the airspace, that is a request you can make with ground control, and they will go ahead and coordinate with Anchorage to get you a squawk code. Now, if you're a student pilot or you're an experienced pilot, but you don't fly in and out of Merrill very often, on your initial call-up, whether you're arriving or you are departing, you're on the ground, on your initial call-up, so either that initial call with ground control or the initial call to tower when you're coming in, let them know you're unfamiliar with Merrill. You're just unfamiliar with the airspace. You could say student pilot, that helps, but you could also just say unfamiliar, and that way you don't have to say whether or not you're a student pilot. They just know that, okay, this guy's not super familiar with the procedures in and out of here. They might give you a little more help, and they'll keep a closer eye on you to make sure that you don't do something silly and get yourself into trouble. Of all the pilot deviations that were issued at Merrill Field, basically all those guys were unfamiliar with the procedures, but no one said they were unfamiliar with the procedures. They either tried to comply with them but got it wrong, or just totally ignored it and did their own thing that they wanted to anyways, and that caused some sort of conflict with other traffic in the area, and they got a pilot deviation. They had to call the tower. It's not really a fun time. Simply saying you're unfamiliar can easily avoid all that. And remember that ATC is there to work with you, not work against you. They're there to help you. But you have to first let them know that you do need a little bit of help so they can do so. Other fun facts about Merrill, they like to use runway 25. They will use runway 25 up to when it's about a steady 5-knot tailwind for runway 25, or until somebody really complains and some pilot really wants to use runway 7. Then they'll go ahead and switch. But expect them to be using runway 25 even if the wind slightly favors runway 7. Remember the places to call up when you're inbound to make that initial call to tower, where they like to hear from you first to give them a little bit of time to coordinate everything. About 3 miles inland if you're coming from the northwest, somewhere over Potter's Marsh if you're down south, and over the Eagle River Bridge if you're coming from the north or that northeast area. Now, although it doesn't have anything to do with Merrill specifically, you should be familiar with the east side overflight procedure, page 373 of the chart supplement, if you're going to be flying around in this area. The purpose of this east side overflight procedure is for all the guys that are flying basically from down here up along here, right along the mountainside. There's some pretty busy airspace through here. You're going to get squeezed between the mountains and the restricted airspace. You're going to have departures out of Anchorage and all sorts of other aircraft. So they have this published procedure here that tells us between Potter's Marsh and the Moose Run Golf Course that they like you to be northbound at 3,500 and southbound at 2,500. That just kind of gives you some good separation, not getting you too high to where you might interfere with airline traffic or any sort of military traffic, and not too low that you're interfering with any of the other arrivals and departures in and out of Hood and Merrill. Now, I know that is a whole lot of information. I know this was a little thorough and a little lengthy, but hopefully that gives you a good idea of what to be expecting when you're going in and out of Merrill. The biggest trick here is print this stuff out, make sure you have it handy, especially pages 386 through 397, at least that's the current page numbers for this edition of the Alaska Chart Supplement. You can find this stuff on Google, simply Google Alaska Chart Supplement. Get familiar with all these reporting points so you know what tower is talking about when you're talking to them, and if you have any questions on this, leave it in the comments below. If you have questions when you're actually flying an airplane, use that term unfamiliar. That will definitely buy you a little bit of grace with ATC, and they are there to help you. They are some pretty helpful folks up in the tower there at Merrill. This video is part of the Fly Mike Alpha Alaska series. For more Alaska-fied videos on flying around Anchorage or anywhere else in Alaska, go ahead and visit flyatmikealpha.com. And remember, guys, if you can't fly every day, then fly at mikealpha.com. We will see you guys next time.